Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Friendship Hall, Contact in the Desert 2017. I'm Lori McDonald. I'll be your host. Very excited today. You have a wonderful free lecture coming up. Just going to make a quick announcement. Tomorrow, Sunday, Friendship Hall, we have Paul Levinda. He's a historical writer on the occult. You'll find him extraordinarily interesting. It's been quickly added to the schedule, so you might want to make note of that. So today we have Mike Bara. He is a TV personality, triple New York Times bestseller, just once. Okay, you know, he is a quadruple New York Times bestseller. Hey, and we really appreciate his research. You're in for a wonderful lecture, so please help me in welcoming Mike Bara.
Mike Bara, who needs a haircut and didn't manage to get one before he came here, but excuse the mullet. It was funny because last night I was doing Jimmy Church Radio, and we were sitting there, and Whitley Strieber comes, waddling by, right? And Jimmy's like, Whitley, sit down. So Whitley sits down. So then he starts introducing me, and he starts telling everybody how I'm a New York Times best-selling author. And all. Can we turn those off? Can we turn those off so they can see the screens better? Working on it? Oh, well, nobody wants to see me. Anyway, so Jimmy starts going on about, New York Times best-selling author, and I'm like, dude, I'm sitting next to Whitley Strieber, who's had about 15 bestsellers over the years, so it's kind of embarrassing. So thanks for that. Anyway, tell Jimmy I said thanks for that. Thanks very much for coming. I hope everybody's happy to be here. I am having a blast so far. It's cooler than last year, right? Last year was miserable, and now it's about 20 degrees cooler, so we like that, and we approve of it. And I have this is my free lecture, so I'm gonna piss you all off for free here in a minute when I talk about politics, probably. But we're gonna keep that short because I think we have to talk about it. I was talking with Richard Dolan last night, and there is something going on politically that's not what we see. It's not what they're trying to get us to believe it is. There's something bigger going on, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit and hopefully not take sides. Although I think it's probably going to be fairly obvious which side I'm on, although that side is not necessarily one person or another. It's more us versus them. And the question is, who is them? And I think some of us, what I want to talk about is I think some of us aren't clear about who them are. And maybe we need to really get clear about that. And then we'll go on to all the stuff I'm really known for, which is looking at stuff on other planets that doesn't belong there, that's artificial. So we'll spend most of the time on that. And then tonight in the same hall at 9:15, which is, I know most people are probably done with Contact by 9:15. They're off drinking with Jimmy, mostly. But I'll be here 9:15 to 11 to talk about the Secret Space Program. NASA and the Secret Space Program, Hidden Agenda is my current book. And so we'll be talking about that. I'll be showing you lots of interesting stuff about where the Secret Space Program technology really came from. And not all of it is alien. Some of it, I think, is stuff that we invented. So that's my schedule. And then tomorrow, I have a panel in the morning, and then I'm replacing Kim Carlsberg, who I think that's also here. Kim couldn't make it in case you had tickets to her workshop. You're going to get me instead. And I'm going to try to do my best to cover more subjects that Kim would have talked about rather than make you listen to my stuff. So on we go. My name is Mike Bara. I do stuff. I got about 7 books out. Dark Mission was the first one, The Secret History of NASA, The Choice, which is about physics and spirituality and the 2012 era, and then books on the moon and Mars and ancient aliens and secret societies, and my current book is this one, Hidden Agenda, NASA and the Secret Space Program, which is really fun to write, and it's current. Everybody talks about it. How many people went to the Secret Space Program panel yesterday with David Wilcock and everybody? Yeah, Corey didn't make it, but it was, I thought it was the best panel I've ever been on, honestly. It was so full of great information. I learned stuff, and I realized how much other people knew, and we all kind of added to each other's stories, which I thought was really great. So, all right, a couple things that are quick that I want to kind of tell everybody about is that most of us here are authors. Most of us write books. It's not really a way to make a living. It's a way to make a minimum wage living if you really want to do that. But it's something that's important to us because we do produce these and do spend a lot of time doing it. what I wanted to talk to you about real quick is that Amazon.com is pretty much where most people get their books from. They've got a little bit of a monopoly, but they have a system where people review their books. And of course there's trolls that hate me, and there's trolls that hate David Wilcock, and there's people that hate other authors out there, and they come in and they give these fake, terrible reviews. And then there's sections on Amazon that show you, there's like a comment down there. Did you find this helpful? And do you want to add a comment to that review? And what I wanted to tell you is that if you like an author's work, whether it's me or Nick Redfern or anybody else, the best thing to do is if you can write them a positive review, go ahead and do it. If it's quick, it doesn't have to be long, but give them the stars you think they deserve. Write them a good review, but then don't respond to the negative reviews, because what NASA tells you where my mind is at. What Amazon does is they take the most active reviews, good or bad, and put them at the top. So when you say, Joe Schmo gave me 1 star and all that, that really pissed me off, and no, that wasn't helpful to me. When you hit no, that actually helps them get that review to the top. Or when you make a comment on a negative review, arguing with somebody, that comment makes their review more active and puts it at the top. So in a way, whoever's book you're giving a review to, you're actually kind of helping the bad reviews get to the top. So just wanted to point that out to people. And my website is mikebara.blogspot.com, and it's not super active lately. Look at that old picture of me. That's 5 years ago. 5 years and maybe 35 pounds ago. I got to get back to the gym here. So if you want to get connections, buy my books, things like that. That's on the website. And we had an election. We had an election in November. It was very upsetting to a lot of people. It was divisive. This is a CNN election night. I love this because the emojis are just so perfect for the expressions. Here's your neutral news media. Now look, let's be honest. Some of us in here are probably lean Democrat. Some of us lean Republican. Some of us are conservative. Some of us are libertarian. I don't want to try to take sides here. I really don't. But, we had this election. Obviously, these people were not happy about the results of the election. There were other people who were clearly not happy. They acted like it was a disaster. Now, I've been through a lot of these, okay? I've been through President Reagan. I've been through the 2 Bushes, which were just, not much fun. I've been through Barack Obama. The union seems to survive them all. So I was kind of weirded out by the degree to which everybody was so super upset about this result. And so this new movement was created, the Resist movement. And, resistance is futile. The guy won the election. He's got the power. He's going to act like it. And, of course, when Donald Trump got in there, which I knew, I was telling people, well before it was popular, he was going to win the election, because I could just tell that people were responding to the message that was coming out. You may not like the message, and that's fine, but they were responding to his message. And, the thing that I think is the issue, though, is the media. It's these guys that are the issue. Because from the beginning, they did whatever they could to undermine him, to the point that it was ridiculous. These are 2 pictures. You remember the inauguration controversy, right? Yeah. The picture on the left is a picture that was spouted in media, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, the people who are supposed to be the linchpins, the ones that hold us together. The real news is supposed to be coming out from those sources. And they put this picture up. This picture was taken several hours before the inauguration. Okay? That's not the crowd. If you look at this picture taken during his actual speech, that white building there is that building right there. So you actually can see it's all filled in, and yet for days after this was proven to be false, there were news outlets, legitimate news outlets, not blogs and things, that were saying, he hardly had anybody there. Now, he had fewer people than Barack Obama. Someone, he said, I probably had the most people ever. I'm sure when he looked out, he was probably like, wow. But he did have fewer people there because there were fences and security that was not in place for the Obama inaugurations. But again, this was the first time I'm starting to go, wow, they're really not letting go of this. And of course, he comes in, and immediately what he starts doing is overturning things. He starts using his executive authority to F this Obama policy, F that Obama policy. You ever seen that video of the cat where it's knocking things off the table, like, fuck this thing, fuck that thing, double fuck that thing, And that's what he was doing. So, and that of course, if you're on the other side, you're going to find that upsetting. I'm sure there were many people who found Barack Obama's executive actions early on to be upsetting. And then, the Hitler comparisons start. Well, Donald Trump drinks water, so did Hitler. What does that mean? So, literally frightening that people will vote for this man. So dangerous. So there's this overreaction going on that I'm very curious about. And of course, we all know We all know that the Donald and Vladimir have a close relationship. In reality, to me, and you don't have to think what I think, but in reality, it doesn't seem like it's really that close. I think that probably Trump, at least, again, taking the public statements, I mean, they were trying. The Democratic side was really trying to stir up conflict with Russia during this campaign. In fact, I found it a little bit chilling and frightening. And Putin probably did prefer Trump to Hillary Clinton. He dealt with the Clintons before, but he probably did prefer Trump because of the fact that Trump was the guy who said, "I don't want to go to war with Russia." So that to me makes a little bit of sense, and I can certainly understand that. But there have been things that have been happening that are kind of unacceptable. This is a Huffington Post reporter passing out Russian flags at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee convention, a few months after the election, and then they ran a story saying, "Oh, they were waving Russian flags at the CPAC convention," trying to make it look like that. And this is all fabricated by the news media. So the story here is not Trump good, Trump bad. The story is, what is the news media's angle on this? And it's gotten so ridiculous. They've dug into this Russia thing. As it stands now, Mike Flynn was actually the center of this. He was actually cleared in January by the FBI. That was run in all the major news outlets. They reviewed his phone conversations and said he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything illegal. And even if Trump was coordinating with Russia, guess what? None of that is criminal. So I don't know what the special prosecutor's for. I don't know what they're investigating. But so far, there hasn't been anything really linking the Trump campaign to Russia. And it seems like a red herring because there are people, and a lot of them are Republicans, who seem to want to go to war with Russia. And that, when David Wilcock talks about the cabal, that's who he's talking about. People like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and John McCain, they are not on Trump's side. They may call themselves Republicans, but they do not like the guy, quite obviously. John McCain, I guess I can understand because Trump kind of trashed him. But, so far we found no real evidence. This is really Dianne Feinstein's face when she kind of said, "Do you have any proof that there's any connection?" She kind of said, "Well, no, there's no evidence." But it's gotten to this point. This was a real, actual story a week and a half ago before all this new stuff broke. President gets 2 scoops of ice cream, everyone else gets 1. That's CNN. That's an actual story. And it was run and people talked about it. So, of course, on Mother's Day, Ivanka kind of trolled CNN with this. Said, I got a lot. So, but again, when they're trying so hard to make it so negative about Trump by doing something that ridiculous, it tells you that there's a bigger thing going on. There's some big picture going on here to try to stop him. Now, if he is who he pretends to be, which is a question. I mean, I certainly don't know that he is, but if he is who he pretends to be, then he is a threat to the system. He could actually create another system. And the thing that it reminds me of, in the weirdest way, is actually Caesar. Caesar and Trump have a lot of similarities. Caesar was of noble blood, and Trump, if you consider money to be nobility, Trump was born into a rich family. He has a lot of common people. There were a lot of white working class voters who hadn't voted in a long time or voted for Barack Obama, who said, "We're not doing this anymore. This whole system is completely messed up. Democrat, Republican, they're all screwed up. And we're going to change things." And they came out and voted for this guy. And somebody who has money, doesn't seem to have any real debt, so he's not beholden to the bankers, and has a group of people, a substantial amount of the populace that's behind him, has incredible power. Now, the thing that frightens me about this that I think we need to look for is, we all know what happened to Caesar, right? At Tu Brute. So is it Newt Gingrich that's going to put the plug on President Trump? I don't know. But I think that there's a distinct possibility that if he manages to succeed in his Drain the Swamp project, that we may see something happen to him. So if you hate him, that may be good. But the thing is, there's a bigger thing going on here. Donald Trump is not just this obnoxious billionaire playboy dude with a hot wife and beautiful children who is out there just doing this for his ego. There's something bigger going on, and when you start watching these things, I always watch the symbolism of this stuff. When he was inaugurated, he had this speech, and in the middle of the speech, after it had started, all these military guys, out of nowhere, come down behind him, behind the steps, and they stand behind him. All the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, right when he made this statement. And he said, what truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became rulers of the nation again. And I mean, if this is not a flat statement that we are going to have a coup here, and I know the military is saying we are not necessarily, we are behind him, we are behind the symbol of what he represents right now, which is the overturning of the current order. And it's the same thing with Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was hated by the patricians, who were the ruling class. Well, who's the ruling class in America today? It's the senators. It's Paul Ryan. It's Mitch McConnell. It's, Chuck E. Schumer. It's Joe Biden. It's all these guys that are in both sides of the aisle that are the ruling class. It's CNN, NBC, ABC. Look at all the power that they've had. Although, as we know, their power in terms of picking a leader is fading, because if it wasn't, this guy wouldn't have been standing there, right? So there is something going on that is a parallel to that. And I said, okay, this is really interesting. I got to keep watching this. So I watched the entire inauguration thing. I watched the entire parade. And again, symbols mean things, by the way. I forgot to mention, symbols mean things. This is right after Barack Obama was elected. In Newsweek magazine, it showed a symbol of these two black hands, Barack's hands, supposedly, obviously, putting the presidential seal up on the wall, like for the first time, symbolic, the first black president, okay? Anybody see anything interesting or different about this picture? The ring, right? He's wearing a ring. That's not his ring. He doesn't wear that ring. But the ring is a Masonic signet ring. Okay? He does not wear it, but it was put into this picture as part of this article about Obama when he first became president. And if you followed my stuff, you know the Freemasons basically ran NASA back in the Apollo days. And the reason that Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon is because Buzz Aldrin was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. And he had to go out first because they only had one camera, so he could take all those pictures of Buzz Aldrin on the moon. All those Apollo 11 pictures, not one of them is Neil Armstrong. They're all Buzz Aldrin, because he's a Freemason. So his job, Neil Armstrong's job, was to basically take pictures of the first Freemason on the moon. And he also performed a Masonic ceremony. You don't believe me? Here's Buzz Aldrin's crew picture. Here's the crew picture, Apollo 11, the official. They always crop it at NASA, like right about here, because guess what? Below that is Buzz wearing his Scottish Rite Freemason signature ring, the same one that Barack Obama was wearing in that image. Here he is, where he brought back this ceremonial apron, this 33rd degree Scottish Rite ceremonial apron, back to Washington, D.C., after he took it with him to the moon on the lunar module. And we know, we've established in a couple of books, with Dark Mission with Richard Hoagland that I wrote, and I covered it in the Moon book that I wrote, that he performed a Masonic ceremony in the lunar module right before he and Neil went out on their first moonwalk. Apollo 11 is a temple. It's a Masonic temple established on the moon. That's what the purpose of it was. And he still wears it today. Here's a picture of him recently. He's still wearing the ring. He still displays it prominently. I got a feeling that maybe the fact that he wore this on the moon instead of his wedding ring is a reason why there's been 2 or 3 Mrs. Aldrin instead of just one. But getting back to the politics, I want to just finish it. So to me, words mean things and symbols mean things. So one thing I've noticed with Trump is when he's done certain things, here he is introducing his Supreme Court selection, Neil Gorsuch, the podium is green. Okay? The presidential podium is supposed to be blue. The symbol of the president is supposed to be blue. Now, I've gone through this. I've looked at it a million times. This is another shot I took. I really stretched the color on this, but that sucker is green. Okay? And it's not always green. Sometimes when he's in the White House, it's blue. When he's out of the White House, it's green. I haven't checked to see maybe what it's going to be on his trip to Saudi Arabia, but I'm keeping an eye on this because it seems like it shows up once in a while as green. And there is a real problem with that because the law says that the seal shall only be blue, it shall not be green. And when you check, again, this is not the best because I've messed with the color a little bit, but I've got multiple shots now, pictures and videos, where all the reds are bright red, the blues are the perfect blue, the whites are pure white, and the freaking podium is green when it's supposed to be blue. And Obama's was always blue. So the question is, what does this mean? Well, there's been a debate, an argument over the years that there are 2 sets of structures, government structures, that we live under. One is the democracy. That's the blue color. That's the one that we all get to live under, which is actually not common law. It's admiralty law, which is a whole different thing. It's the law of the sea. But that is a corporation. The United States government is actually a corporation founded in 1871 after the Civil War, because the Civil War was not necessarily about slavery. There's people that say the Civil War was actually about the fact that the southern states, who were new to the Union, didn't want to pay off the war debts from the Revolutionary War of the original 13 colonies. So that's why there was a split, and that's why there was a war. The South lost, and so there's this corporate government supposedly established. Well, okay, I read this stuff. It's kind of interesting. I don't know it to be a fact. But around that is the original republic. Supposedly, we lost the republic in 1789 when we refused to pay our debts to the French from the Revolutionary War. So we came to an arrangement with the British where we sold out to the British, and the British actually owned our national government. And of course, time has gone by, every 70 years or so, when you go through international bankruptcy, if you can't pay your bills, every 70 years, you have to come back and come up with a new plan to either pay the debt off, or you come up with a plan to have it discharged again. Discharged only means, okay, 70 years from now, we'll talk to you about it again. Well, if you look at the date, that's really interesting, because the Constitution was put into place in 1789. Okay, so 1789, and I'm way off space, but we'll get back to it. I promise aliens come into this. I promise. I'm almost done with this part. In 1789, the Constitution was formed. Well, the Constitution comes from a word called constitutor, which is someone who secures the debt of another person. It's a financial document. 70 years later was 1859. So what happened in 1859? Guess what? The North and the South split and we had a civil war. 70 years after that was 1929. What happened in 1929? The stock market crashed. We went into the Great Depression, and they redid all the money and came up with fiat currency. They got rid of the gold, they got rid of the silver. 70 years after that was 1999. And what happened a year or two after that? 9/11 happened. And a bunch of new stuff came into the tax code. So I think what's happening is we're kind of in this period where we're still trying to adjust to whatever the plan was, whatever agreement we made in 1999. Now, okay, so the republic is different. They operate under different laws. They operate under common laws, which is where basically if you come to me and say, that presentation really sucked, I want my money back, even though you didn't pay any money, but let's pretend you did. And I go, okay, well, I'm sorry, I got to make you right, so here's your $10, right? Under that, that's how the republic is supposed to work. There don't have to be any lawsuits because people just are supposed to do the right thing. We're human beings, of course, though, so we never do that. And the electors, the people that are supposed to be the electors, the ones who really vote for president. Remember that big controversy, how we're going to try to get all the electors to vote for somebody besides Trump? Well, they're supposedly citizens of the republic as opposed to citizens of the democracy. So there is these rumors that David talks about of the cabal fighting to keep the democracy in place, the corporatocracy, versus the people who want to bring the republic back and free us from all this crap. Well, okay, fine. I hear this stuff. It doesn't mean that much to me. But I kept watching the inauguration. I kept watching the celebrations. I watched what was called the inaugural parade. That's basically a military parade which takes place right after the inauguration ceremony. And the president walks some of the route, and then he goes into a little stand, and I think they had a concert, and then they kept up with the parade, and all these military units go by. So again, remember, these guys that were standing behind him when he made that statement are now parading in front of him. At the end of the parade, the last thing that happens is they set off fireworks. Okay? So they set off the fireworks. And I'm watching my TV, and I'm looking at the fireworks, and it says USR. That's a screenshot. United States, not of Russia, some people think Russia, United States Republic. That's what that means. So all I'm telling you is something is going on with this, and I don't know what it is, but I do know that when they tell you that the president gets 2 scoops of ice cream and everybody else 1, and doesn't that make him a terrible person, there's some other story out there they're covering up. The last big controversy last week, which I don't want to get into, kind of came up at the same time some new information broke about this Seth Rich story. Seth Rich was a guy who worked at the DNC who may have been the guy who leaked all the emails to WikiLeaks, which hurt Hillary Clinton badly, and he was found murdered. And that's really kind of an unsolved murder, and nobody knows where his computer is, and blah, blah, blah. So whenever, all I'm saying is, I don't want to take sides necessarily, Trump good, Trump bad, but there's something going on, something big. And these people that are behind all this, they have a plan. Nobody knows what it is, but it does involve us, because the bottom line is that this is the same intelligence communities the CIA, the NSA, the National Reconnaissance Office, all these people are the same people that are keeping the truth about ETs from us and have been for 60, 70, 80 years. So something's happening. Maybe it's disclosure we're getting prepped for. I don't know. But I think we're going to be in for a shock over the next few years. I think what's going to happen is going to be very shocking. Jimmy Church talked about that at the Secret Space Program panel the other day. Okay, how weird does it get? Well, U2 is on tour. Anybody know? Anybody like them? They're old. Yeah, I love them, but I wish they'd play something from the 21st century rather than stuff they're playing right now. So they're playing a tour of all these old music, but part of the tour is they're making a political statement. Well, one of the things they brought up was an old TV show called Trackdown. It's a Western series from the 1950s. And there's an episode of that where there's a villain named Trump. And his secret plan is to build a wall around the town. I'm not kidding. He's going to build a wall around the town to protect everybody, and he's got these other magical plans and magical elixirs, and he's going to tell people all these secrets and everything like this, and he gets shot by the hero eventually, and he's like, oh, you're a liar. I don't know what this means. This could be as simple as a writer who has a dream at night, and he actually journeys into the future in his dream, and he pulls this information in and comes up with this story. It could be something like that, or this could be somebody planting the seeds of what's going to happen. All I know is I got to start watching the other episodes of this series and find out what happens, because I don't know what's going to happen. So there is something big going on, and it's something we need to pay attention to. There's all kinds of things that they don't tell us. Where's Lori? Did Lori leave? The Canadian? Yes? You're Canadian? Your prime minister is Justin Trudeau. Young, handsome guy. Everybody loves him, right? He's a great guy. Except he's not Justin Trudeau. His name is Justin Castro. He's Fidel Castro's love child with Margaret Trudeau, the wife of Pierre Trudeau. Oh, you don't believe me? There he is, right there, with his son. And there they are. You tell me that this guy is not related to this guy. Margaret Trudeau was known to fool around. She was known for that. Mick Jagger, other celebrities. She met Fidel Castro on several occasions, and here she is giving him his love child. Okay? So there's a lot of things they aren't telling us, and these are the things it's cool, because these are the things we're going to get to find out. You know, I talked back when I wrote this book called The Choice about how the physics that were changing, the physics of consciousness that were changing over this 2012 era, we're going to push all the truth out. So it's starting to come out. They may not acknowledge it, but it is true. I mean, basically, put a beard on that guy. It's Fidel Castro. Here's a couple more shots of the three of them. What a nice family they would have made. And of course, Chelsea Clinton. This is Chelsea Clinton's real father. His name is Webster Hubble. Talked about him today. He was a special assistant to President Bill Clinton. Okay? He was also the guy that when Bill Clinton first took office, the first thing he said to him was, find out who killed JFK and whether or not there's aliens. And he came back and he asked around. He said, I did ask around, and the answer was Lee Harvey Oswald and no. So Bill Clinton was lied to in 1992. So these are the things they don't tell us. This is, however, Bill Clinton's other son. His name is Danny Williams. And his mom knew Bill Clinton in Arkansas and had a child by him. So all I'm saying is there's a lot of, and I'm sure there's other things out there. You know, these are just the ones I pulled off that were the easiest on the internet. I don't mean to bash on the Democrats. But there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. This Pizzagate thing, I think, is something you should pay attention to. And this kid has gone around, you know, and you know how they always joke about how everybody who comes up against the Clintons is dead? Well, Danny Williams is right out there open saying, I want a DNA test. I believe Bill Clinton's my dad. And he claims that Bill has supported him over the years financially. And, you know, if that's true, then how come Danny Williams is still walking around? So there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, now, on to what we really want to talk to. All I'm saying is, there's some really interesting stuff coming. So let's pay attention to it, try to reserve our judgment about who's good and who's bad, and just see what happens. Because I think we're all going to be shocked when the truth comes out about who the good guys turn out to be and who the bad guys turn out to be. I really do. Okay, so let's talk about some stuff that's come out. There's a great site called Secure Team 10. I think they have some YouTube channel. You guys have probably watched them. They're really interesting. They came up with some stuff that I thought was pretty cool the other day, which is there's a story about what they called a tank on the moon. So I'm looking at this image, And I find this image of the moon. It's a debris field of a crater where a crater has come down and hit, and a bunch of stuff has been thrown up. And I'm looking at this image, and I find a couple things that do catch my eye. They look really different. So the three of them are highlighted here, and the first one we're going to zoom in on is this guy right here. And, okay, it's supposed to be a big boulder, but when I looked at it, this guy says, well, it's a tank. And I'm like, okay, it's a tank. I can see this is the side, this is the side, this is the back, this is the front, this is maybe the turret, right? But there's no gun. It's a tank without a gun, but, who knows what happened to the gun. And it's kind of interesting because as you go through the shadow here, you can see that there's a bright spot there. And that kind of makes it look like something has kind of an arch to it, and there's sun shining through. But I thought, this is kind of interesting stuff. And I started looking for other images of it. I went back to the originals. I found the original Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter image. This thing is, if it's a tank, it's pretty big because it's about 75 yards long, which is really big. So it's bigger than it's even bigger than the tanks the Germans built, and the Germans built some honking tanks. So, I went a little deeper. This is probably the best image, and, you lose some fidelity with this, but, it kind of looks like it could be a structured object. You've got very straight line there, kind of a straight edge, this rounded area here on top, and it does compare fairly favorably to the traditional shape of a tank. But the question is it really a tank? Here they are kind of side by side. See the turret, the side skirts, the straight front, straight back. Could be. But then there's another object nearby, which is quite a bit weirder. This is supposed to be a boulder. And remember, in a crater impact, it's supposed to be just boulders. You shouldn't get stuff that looks like this. What I find fascinating about this is that see this bright spot here, this bright area? It's sort of shaped, it's all jaggedy. That looks like a piece of sheet. That looks to me like a screwed up sheet metal hunk that's kind of been torn up here, and it certainly is nothing that should be sitting on the lunar surface. And there's even some weird, if you get into the subtle details, there's some kind of weird little hooks, and there's a cylinder there. Cylinders are not naturally produced very easily. They're very difficult to produce. There's another object at the top of the picture which looks like kind of half of a flying saucer. See this sort of disc shape here? And then there's some sort of centerpiece that kind of spirals around like that, and it's cut off. Now the rest of it's not visible in the image. The high resolution part of it kind of cuts off. But to me, it looks like sort of a flat disc, and you're looking at it from the top down with this sort of central tube coming up out of it. So what is all this stuff? Well, in looking at the image, I have to say honestly, it looks like a debris field. But some of these things that are in the debris field don't look like debris. So they look like machinery to me, because I'm an engineer and they strike me as machines. What's possible is that, all over the moon there are these sub-bases. There are areas inside the moon that if you hit them with a projectile, these objects get tossed up into the air and then come down to rest. And they're shattered, they're broken, but they're parts of different, possibly artificial machinery. So it reminded me of this image. This is on the dark side of the moon, which is actually the back side, but we'll call it the dark side because it just sounds so much cooler. Nobody says, come to the backside, we have bacon. They say, come to the dark side, we have bacon. So it's cooler. This thing there's another image of something I call a tank, and I don't have a picture of it, but it's in this image. There's a pyramidal object I call the ziggurat right there, and then up in the corner is my favorite spot. This is a mountain range, so the spacecraft's at an angle like this. I'm taking pictures out the back end, and there's this area up here of this mountain, and as I looked at it, I started seeing, up in this mountain, there's the close-up of the ziggurat thing. You see a square shape, a dome on top, a single entrance. See this angle here, these triangle shapes, which is exactly, it looks a lot like the ziggurat at Ur in Iraq, which are a specific kind of military pyramid that were made as like a base of defense. But as I looked at this particular area up at the top there, let's go back. Up here, the edge of the picture, especially what caught my eye is this area over here, because you've got some weird stuff here, and it's kind of subtle. I could talk about it, but I didn't bring my slides for that. You've got this area right here, which to me, as I'm looking at this, you're looking at the side of a mountain at an angle. So what that is that looks like that's actually square. If you were to look straight onto this thing, it would be square. And it looks like a hangar door of some kind. So if it's a hangar door, well, what's inside of the hangar? Well, this thing is inside of it. Now, I don't know exactly what this is, but as I begin to play with it and enhance it and do different things to it, it got more and more interesting. So I'll tell you what it is. It's a flying saucer with landing gear and some kind of telescope on it. Now, again, it's just to caution everybody, I'm an engineer, so I started out back in the days we have to do 2D drawings, and so I am really experienced at taking a 2D picture and saying, okay, what does this look like in 3 dimensions? Not everybody is, so you might not see what I see right away, but just bear with me. We'll try to talk you down. This is the disc shape right here. There's a dome on top. There's a vent there and a vent there, a couple of vents there. This is like some sort of landing gear. This is just a bunch of debris. And then there's this cylindrical thing kind of attached to the front of it, which I don't know what it is, but again, as I continued to play with it, it got even more interesting. And this is only enlarged about 4 times. That's why it's blurry. If I could ever get my hands on the original negative, if they haven't tampered with it, which NASA has done quite a few times to a lot of things, I would just love to see what this thing looks like, because the original negative is going to be about like this big, and we could work with that. Here's a couple of side-by-side comparisons of this. But it's a flying saucer in a hangar, in a bunker, on the moon, on the dark side, and this is the kind of thing that we see all the time when we start looking at pictures of the moon. And one last shot of it. Right up there. So see how small it is in the original? And this is actually working with the current digitized version of NASA's image, this current image. It's 5567 is the image number. So anybody can go look it up. It's on my blog if you want to go there. There's a bunch of stories about it. And it's interesting because the ziggurat, remember the pyramid thing I showed you at the beginning, which is right here? On this digitized image, they kind of erased that. They messed with the contrast. They did a bunch of different stuff. Kind of erased it, so it's not really there. It's there on an original Apollo print, a photographic print from 1968, 69. It's there. You can definitely see it's a pyramid, but when you get to the NASA digitized version, it's all wiped out. Well, somebody at NASA was obviously, hey, there's a pyramid on the thing, go wipe it out, but they missed all this other stuff. They just didn't have time to go through and get rid of the flying saucer. So I'm hoping that nobody ever does. Now, NASA is deceptive. This is a picture of what they say is debris running down the side of a crater. What I love to do with NASA images is I love to flip them upside down. Because just because they say that up is that way doesn't mean that up is that way. What do you do with this? What happens when you flip this upside down? Well, when you flip it upside down, it becomes this. Now, my model for NASA and other people's is that there is glass structure, crystalline structure all over the planet, some of it as much as 20 miles high, and that's a whole separate presentation, that is on the planet, that is there, was used as a meteor shield, because glass is actually as strong or stronger than steel, would be a perfect thing for a meteor shield in a vacuum, in a lunar vacuum. So if you look at this, it actually begins to take on a 3D properties. It's kind of jagged, it's kind of sticking up. It looks like a bunch of crystals or glass that's been beaten down by meteors for millions and millions and millions of years. And when you get closer, you can even see that, to my mind anyway, this is all empty in here. So this stuff comes up and around in a big circle like this, and it's all beaten down and jagged and sticking up. But you would never see that if you bought the original NASA version of what this is. See these spires sticking up out of the ground? You can't have that on the moon. If what NASA tells us about the moon is true, this is impossible. Yet, there it is on their own images. Okay, now, Ceres. Ceres is another object that's been talked about a lot. It is a moon-sized object. They call it a planetesimal in the asteroid belt. It's the only really spherical, big object in the asteroid belt, and it's caused a lot of interest because there have been a couple objects on there that are kind of curious. One is this one, which NASA described in their literature as a pyramid. And again, playing the same game that we play with the political stuff, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. They're calling this a pyramid, but it doesn't really look like a pyramid. It kind of looks like a natural formation to me. But it has these striations, these stripes down the side. Now that's important because I'm going to tell you why they called this a pyramid a little bit later when we talk about Mars. But it has these striations, these vertical lines on it that go down the slopes of this thing. There's various pictures of it. Here's what it looks like from the side. It kind of looks like it might be a flat top pyramid there. Here's other lower resolution images that we're taking, because there's the probe out there. Oh God, what's the name of the probe? New Dawn? No. Is that Pluto? Pluto's New Dawn. I don't know. There's a probe out there taking pictures. And it gets close to Ceres and far away, and it takes all these different pictures. This is a good shot from the side. Looks like a cyst or a pimple kind of on Ceres. But there's nothing else like it on Ceres. There's no mountains except this one. And it's kind of sticking up. Here's a better high-resolution version. And again, you can see the striations going down the side. And to me, what this kind of reminded me of is something called a cinder cone on Earth. This is a cinder cone. Basically what happens is lava, molten lava, pushes up, it forms a cone, and then when the pressure stops, it kind of collapses and sags back in the middle. But it has these vertical stripes on it, but it also usually has a fairly smooth crater, which is different than what the one on Ceres appears to have. Here's a cinder cone erupting. There's a nearby here's a cinder cone, and see how it's got the collapsed hole in the middle? But this one on Ceres doesn't have that. It has this rough, strewn top. And another thing that bothers me about this a little bit is that if you look at the images, it's very clear in some spots and then very blurry. Like right in here, there's a lot of blur right there. And I don't really know why that would be blurry when everything else is so clear. But here's Black Butte near Mount Shasta, which is right next to Mount Shasta. It is a cinder cone. And as you get into the details, you begin to see that there is just a lot of stuff up here. And I'm like, okay, this looks kind of natural. Why is NASA making such a big deal out of this? But other people look at it with different eyes. I have a friend named Keith Laney who's done some wonderful work with NASA images, and he's got a website called thehiddenmission.com. Should have put that in white, Keith, so everybody could read it. Hiddenmission.com, which I highly recommend for his image processing skills. And he's looking at this and saying, these things may not come all the way up to the top. There may be like weird structures inside of it. And he actually had some artists look at it. And when the artist took a look at it, this was his version of what we were seeing as opposed to the NASA version. So he's saying that, this begins to look more like a bunch of girders that used to come up together, and maybe the top got sheared off or it fell down in on itself. And the stuff inside is kind of regular and geometric. Here's another close-up. See the sides, how he's seen all this stuff, and I'm looking at it and I'm kind of going, I kind of see that too in the original images, right? And then here's an ultra close-up of what the artist came up with. And it's like, I see that, and I know that's artificial. I see what's on the NASA image, I'm not so sure, but it could be this. This really could be what it looks like. Here's an ultra close-up of what he thinks he sees. And, artists just look at things a little differently, but they see things that we might not see with our own biases and preconceived notions. Now, Ceres is interesting for something else. It's this bright spot in a crater called Oscillator Crater on Ceres, and it is about, I think the scale is like 100 times brighter than anything else on the planet. The whole rest of the moon is this dull gray color, but then there's this glowing stuff in the middle of this crater. Now, curiously, there it is. There's an example of the entire surface of Ceres laid out like an orange peel. And see how much brighter the center of that crater is. So you got this circular center thing, and then you got a little block. And as you zoom up on it, it's been visible from the Hubble Space Telescope from millions of miles away. As we get closer and closer to it, it remains incredibly bright. Now, NASA's explanation for this is that it's salt. Okay? Must be glow-in-the-dark salt, because this is Ceres in the dark, taken in shadow, and look at how bright that still is. Nothing is that bright without internal illumination. Something is making it shine. Okay? And it's not heat, and it ain't salt. Now, they've run some different, they're still trying to push the salt thing, but it's not believable. Linda Moulton Howe, God bless her heart, argues with me all the time. It's salt, it's salt. She thinks it's salt because some PhD told her it was salt. It's Coke, yeah. Yeah, it's Elon Musk's cocaine. Did you guys ever hear that? Elon Musk, when he's talking about Mars, like, we could send, 50,000 pounds of crack cocaine to Mars. And I'm like, wow, and then you're going to go there and party, Elon, or what? That's his secret plan. He's going to escape with a bunch of bikini models and go snort Coke on Mars. It could be. It could be Coke, but I think it's probably not Coke. The question is, what is it? Now, it's interesting because the center part is very, very super bright, and then there's this square and these little geometric shapes. So there's this square area there that's very, when I see geometry, it's like nature can accidentally make geometry, but it doesn't happen very often, except on Mars, where it happens all the freaking time. But again, there's another shot of the brightness of it, so you can tell there's something different going on there. What is it? Well, it looks exactly like a city from space. This is Las Vegas from space. Vegas has got a lot of lights, let's face it, and they're burning all night, so you can definitely see Vegas from space. This is what it looks like. And actually, the bright spot in the center of Ceres is roughly the same size land area as Las Vegas. So the question then is this salt or is this Vegas on Ceres? And here's some other shots of it. There's a whole bunch of shots now. And again, I don't know the answer to this, except that this kind of thing always catches my eye, and I'm very curious. I start to see some interesting shapes in the center here as they reduce the libido, the albedo. Libido is a different thing than albedo, folks. Albedo is reflectivity. As they reduce that, it starts to get more interesting. Here's a shot where you see this weird spiraling kind of stuff, which could be fracturing. But when a crater is formed, you're not typically going to get fracturing at the end of the cooling cycle. You're going to get something like that at the beginning. You're going to see fracturing around the rim of the crater, not in the center of it. So there's this weird sort of geometric patterning here. And it starts to look like this is some sort of ice cap or white reflective cap. Now, here's the thing. If you're building a tent in space, some place to live, something like a tent, like this structure here, you don't have the atmosphere to regulate the temperature, right? So in the cold, in the dark, it's going to get really cold. So you need something to retain the heat, which might look from space, come back, it's not going to go back, which might look from space something like that at night. But in the daytime, you're going to want it to be really bright and highly reflective to keep what's underneath from getting too hot. So this begins to have the look of something interesting and potentially artificial. And again, as the artist begins to look at it, he sees patterns of geometry around this particular center cone. Here's some really high resolution stuff. And look at this, there's this all kind of eroded. It's got a very cellular look to it. Clearly there is some rock there, but you could also build a shield like this out of rock if you wanted for some reason to live on Ceres. And the thing is, true is that there's stuff all over the solar system. I mean, there's all kinds of moons that have really interesting looking weird places on them. So as the same artist applied his eye to this, he began to look at this and say, there's something more here. There's a pattern. And here's another shot of it. And here's a colorized shot from NASA, where you see just how really weird this whole complex is. There's Vegas. There's, I don't know, Laughlin? Yeah, is it still Laughlin? Here's a really good close-up. And again, I look at this and I don't see geometry. I mean, I see geometry. I don't see natural flows of lava or something like that. I see like shattered structure. And here's what the artist put together, that he thinks this is some sort of canopy over the top, would be highly reflective to keep the temperature moderated, and he thinks we're seeing underneath some deeper structure. Here's a really good shot of it. And I don't disagree with this, and I'm kind of leaning towards this is what we're looking at here. So this is why this area is so interesting and would be so interesting to NASA, is because it has these characteristics. If that's really what we're looking at once we get everything sorted out and get a properly processed image, that's artificial. That's a circus tent with a city underneath it. Okay, and it reminds me the most, really, I thought of Moonbase Alpha from an old, really bad science fiction show called Space 1999. Anybody ever watch that show? Yeah. It's a great show. It's a great show, except all the major characters whisper to each other. You used to do this thing where it's like, John, yes, why are we whispering? Why are we whispering? Doesn't Kiefer Sutherland do that? You guys watch that show, the Kiefer Sutherland? He whispers everything. It's like, I'm the president. Go blow them up. It's like, what? What? I'm sorry, Mr. President? Okay, so Mars. There's stuff going on Mars. Mars, by the way, this is a correct color image of Mars. Yes, the sky on Mars is blue. It is not red. That's been proven over and over again. You don't believe me? Read my books, Ancient Aliens on Mars or Ancient Aliens on Mars 2 or even Dark Mission. The sky's blue. The sky has to be blue because of something called Rayleigh scattering, which means that the sky is always blue on pretty much every planet. That's just the way it is, because when sunlight hits an atmosphere, it scatters into the blue. So these pictures that you see that where NASA has everything red is just nonsense. This is an image from a probe called Phobos 2. It was a Russian probe in 1989, famous for being abducted by a UFO, or so they say. I kind of reached the conclusion that's not the case. But Phobos 2 took some pictures of the Mars moon Phobos. Well, here's Phobos. And if you notice, it's kind of a rock, like a rock, not Iraq, like the country. But it has this weird kind of cross-hatching pattern on it from 1989. As we've gotten closer and taken more images of it, this is the best I could do with the Phobos 2 data. It looks like some sort of interactive mesh, 90 degrees everywhere on this. It looks like it was built up out of something else, like somebody built this thing and put it into orbit around Mars, and it's been beaten up over the years. If you go into ultra close-up, these are some of the more recent images that we've taken with our Mars probes. You know, again, nature, what is the line? You guys see the movie Prometheus? God doesn't work in straight lines. Very rarely does God work in straight lines. He does for short distances. But look at this. You got parallel line here, parallel line here, parallel line here, parallel line here, and then, at 90 degrees to that, we've got this. So apparently the boulders on Phobos like to just run up and down at 90-degree angles to each other. That's artificial. The rest of it doesn't look very artificial. But another interesting thing about Phobos is that the Russians did some analysis and kind of pinged it with different instruments and found out that there are these vast hollow caverns inside of it, some of them as big as 200 feet, which could be, I don't know, apartments, condos, something like that. So nobody really knows what Phobos is, but we have our suspicions. Now, on the surface of Phobos, which Buzz Aldrin talked about first in 2009, was they got an image of this thing sticking up out of the surface of Phobos. Its nickname is the Phobos monolith, because a lot of people said it reminds them of the monolith from 2001. You can see from the shadow, it has a square top. See that? Here's the shadow. It's very tall. It's got a square top. So it's not unlike the monolith from 2001, which had the exact same shape. And notice again the little mound here as they dug out and excavated around it, right? So here's another shot, more recent of it, and it maintains its shape. It is not just a boulder. It is a vertical, thin monolith, I guess. So again, side-by-side comparison. The monolith from 2001, the monolith on Phobos from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and various other missions. So this thing has just been really, really interesting. And of course, here's another shot of Phobos itself. But you've got all these different patterns, this weird, rectilinear geometry on it. And you've got the Phobos monolith itself. But as I go back and you look at this comparison, here's the thing. In the film, Dr. Floyd, is being shown pictures of Tycho Magnetic Anomaly 1, which is the monolith. And they said, we don't know anything about it except two things. We know that it's been there for at least 4 million years, and it seems to have been deliberately buried. And when you look at it, the way you can tell it's deliberately buried, again, is this mound. Now look at the Phobos monolith. See this? How bright this is? Look at how dark that is. And it's a mound just like this. In other words, this sucker was also, in my opinion, deliberately buried, because you've got the digging all around the base of it. Either somebody dug it up or somebody dug in a space, stuck the thing in there, and left it. Now, the Canadians were supposed to go there and launch a mission and land there and put a rover right up to it, and that just evaporated. NASA said, no, I don't think so. You're not really going to go there. If you go, we'll shoot you down. So, Mars is another great place for pyramids. Now, we've all seen pyramids on Earth. They're artificial. There's debates now about the ones in Serbia. Is it Serbia? Bosnia, Serbia, or Croatia. I get them all mixed up. There used to be one country, right? But on Mars, there have been pyramids for a long time. These are Carl Sagan's discovery. He called them the Pyramids of Elysium. This is from the very first Pioneer 4, the very first NASA mission to Mars. It took some really bad pictures, but they are partially buried tetrahedral pyramids. And now I'm kicking myself for not having some of Keith Laney stuff, because there's lots of other pyramids that look like this on Mars. Pyramids on Earth, we know them from their shadows that they cast. We know the basic shape of them. We know why they are pyramids. We know that they were built by somebody. They're not natural structures. So if they're not natural structures on Earth, then why do they have to be natural structures on Mars? And the only reason is because NASA says so. Because science wants you to believe that. Here's another shot of the pyramids of Elysium. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to look around, and I want to know what other pyramids there are on Mars. And when you start doing that, you begin to find a whole buttload of them. No, these are China. There's a couple pyramids in China recently. There have been some new pyramids discovered. What's interesting about these two is that one of them has a squared flat top. One of them has a pointed top, or at least it used to. It's eroded. It's definitely eroded, and they've planted all kinds of shrubberies on them because they don't really want people to know that there's pyramids in China. I don't know why. I wish the Chinese would loosen up. Maybe Trump can get us a good trade deal, and part of it can be, show us the pictures of your pyramids. So I went looking on Mars. The one on the left is a Martian pyramid from Elysium on Mars. And this one is a Chinese pyramid that we just looked at. And if you look at them, they're basically the same. See this edge right here? Okay, edge right here. Edge right there. Edge right there. Edge right there. Now this corner is buried on Mars. But here's another thing I want you to notice. When stuff erodes, it erodes along what they call fractal lines. In other words, it erodes along the lines of the shape it had originally. So you can take a look at something that's beaten down, and you can look at it and say, okay, it used to look like this. You can kind of build it back up in your head. Notice on the Chinese pyramids that along here and along here, notice how those are curved. Because what's happening is those walls are slumping in a little bit, exactly like this one on Mars. The reason why this one is worse off than this one, why the Martian one is worse off than the Chinese one, is because it's been there longer, and it's bigger, and there's more mass pushing down on the erosional process. And when you lay them over the top, the proportions are exactly the same. I did nothing to these two images. That is the Chinese pyramid on top of the Martian pyramid, the only difference being the corner of the Martian pyramid that's buried, right there. So if the proportions are exactly the same, and we know the one on Earth is artificial, then why isn't the one on Mars artificial? It has to be. And I think what these are is these are condos. There's ideas that we're going to build entire self-contained cities. This one's supposed to be in Shanghai, China. That you can hold hundreds of thousands of people inside of a pyramidal structure. It's a very efficient way to use space. There's other ones on Mars. Here's a pyramid called the D&M pyramid. This is very near the famous face on Mars in Cydonia. It's that guy right there. See the pyramidal sides, the faces right there, the facets. Here's another shot. Well, this kind of blurs it out, but again, you have a triangle face there, a triangle face there. And the thing about the D&M that's so amazing is that it's actually a pentagonal pyramid, 5 sides, and it's symmetrical bilaterally around 2 different axes, one going this way and one going that way. So in other words, it's symmetrical 2 different ways. And there are people at NASA who still argue with me that it's a natural formation. I'm just like, how crazy can you be? There's just, again, if there is a 5-sided, eroded, natural structure on Earth that has symmetry about 2 centers of axes, show me a picture. I'm wide open to it. I've been asking them for that for 20 years. I've never gotten a picture yet of anything on Earth. Here's another shot of it. You can see it a little bit better. Face, face. One line of symmetry goes that way, one goes that way. And we didn't discover this aspect of it, this sort of tail thing that extends, until we got much better pictures of it later on. A couple more shots in 3D. These are 3D projections made from European Space Agency stuff. Okay, now, what else is on Mars? Well, there are trees on Mars. One set of these trees is on Mars. The other set is at Wayne Newton's place in Vegas. Mars, Vegas. These are banyan trees. They're called banyan trees. Arthur C. Clarke is the one, the famous science fiction author who wrote 2001, by the way, was the guy who said, there's banyan trees on Mars. Now, NASA says these are just stains on the ground. And you're fooling yourself. It's just dark stuff like carbon dioxide squirting up out of the ground and spreading across. But you can see that there's 3-dimensional relief on these things. You can see they're casting little shadows. There's depth to them, and they're no different than this. Again, Earth, Mars. Mars, Vegas. Wayne Newton, Mars. Tell me the difference. I don't see a difference. Unless Wayne Newton is now living on Mars and we just don't know it. Maybe he went there with Andy Basiago. Did I say that out loud? I did. Okay. Now, this is the Antikythera mechanism. Is that what they call it? Antikythera, did I pronounce it correctly? And, again, this is important because it's some sort of sextant or some sort of navigational instrument they found in a shipwreck that may be I've heard up to 3,000 years old, but probably not quite that old. But it is a very ancient mechanism, and it has a bunch of internal workings. It's very sophisticated. It's like some sort of gear system to use to navigate ships at sea. And it's really, really interesting, but what I find fascinating about it is that, it has these 4 spokes on the front wheel. That used to turn back in the day. It was used somehow. It's part of some mechanism. Well, there are things like this on Mars, too, because if you look at pictures, what you'll see is stuff on Mars. This is a microscopic camera, so it's not really super small, but it's, I don't know, about that big, maybe an inch or so wide. This looks like a bunch of rocks, except what's that right there? Well, I'll tell you what that is. That is some sort of pipe with a fitting on it, a flare fitting, to screw onto something else with a little, what do you call it, valve? There's a little valve handle. So again, you got square, center, and a circle around the outside edge. So if there is or was an ancient civilization on Mars, you would see it at the big scale, you would see it at the small scale, the medium scale, and you would see it way down at the bottom. And there's stuff everywhere. This is a fossilized rock outcropping which has some sort of plumbing that, is built into it. Here's an example of another mechanism on Mars. Notice again this circular shape here in the cross, and again a circle here and 3 spokes around a central hub. That may be a cannon. This thing's about the size of a suitcase, and it's all crushed down like it got thrown up in the air and fell, but it has mechanical properties. It has things that I recognize. There are these long tube channels that run on Mars that have apparently supporting structures coming out the side, and NASA says these are sand dunes. Okay, I don't know sand dunes that are a different color than everything else that surrounds them. Sand should be the same color, and also they're regularly spaced, and they follow the topology of the terrain. And again, it's very similar to a water pump on Earth. These guys I like a lot. These are like old stuff. This is like 98, 99. These are on the side of a mountain in Mars, and what is interesting and striking about all these is that these guys are all parallel, pretty much parallel, these white guys, and they're all tubular, and they come out of the mountain and then back into the ground. This is some sort of plumbing in the side of this mountain, like a waste system or something. It's been exposed by the material on top of it being removed. And again, I don't know of a good explanation for this geologically, and NASA doesn't even really try. Now, what's really interesting is that there are a whole group of people on Facebook and other sources, other places, that are absolutely scouring all of the rover images and finding incredible stuff. They're finding stuff that shouldn't be there. This is a shot from a group called Mars: A Civilization Lost. That's the sole NavCam image. And you see the spidery pattern of all this stuff? That all looks structural. It's not very far away from the rover, but that all looks like some sort of construction. It's not natural geology, and they have all kinds of stuff that they found. Here's another shot of what looks like a really plain image of the surface of Mars, but when you zoom up on it and you flip it upside down again, it starts to get a little bit more interesting. Here's the same crevasse, and right over here, there's this sort of squared off area. Look at these squares. That's always what catches my eye, is the right angles. And it looks like you got some sort of, garden there. You come and you walk out and you go down a ladder and across over here. And there are walls to this thing. This was discovered by, he doesn't give his name on this one. Okay, United Family of Anomaly Hunters. And again, I don't know what this is. It looks like some sort of symbol or medallion or something. But as you zoom up on this, you can actually kind of see, because of light hitting it, that there is like a walkway and a pathway you can walk on, or a wall. All the way around. You can walk all the way around this. That should not be there. Here it is colorized to give you a better idea of what they're talking about. It looks like some sort of construction built into this crevasse. Now, again, flipping images. Here's an image that NASA says, and they put false color on it, but here's an image where they say, okay, this is dark material, when they ever specify what that is, rolling down the slopes of a mountain or sand dunes. Okay, fine. I flip it upside down. As I flip it upside down, they start to look more like trees. And if you notice, look at this one right here. See, this guy's he's got like 4 legs, and there's empty space in between them. Okay, that is not a stain. That is some sort of actual 3-dimensional structure. See right there? And several of these other guys have that. They look like trees getting blown up. Look like trees getting blown over in the wind. So as you look at Mars, you begin to think, or I begin to think, there's stuff down there that's actually alive. That Mars is not the dead world they say it is. Now, what else is there on Mars? Lots of people are finding stuff. Here's a good one. NASA says this is a rock. This was featured on Ancient Aliens, an episode I did last year. Okay, it's a rock with 2 eyes, a nose, a face, a mouth, and an elongated skull, and maybe some sort of ceremonial hat. Here's another shot of it. And again, I forget the gentleman who found this, but they have him on the show, so if you go to the episode. It looks to me a lot like these, which are headstones that are found in South America. Maybe a related species. Am I wrong, or is that kind of look like that? Yeah. Now, do you think that's a stretch? Size proportion is roughly, well, that is very big. That is about, I think, 15 feet tall, bigger than a person. This is about, it would be about 3 or 4 feet wide and tall. So it's, but it's a big rock on Mars. Remember the pyramid on Ceres? When they said, oh, we found a pyramid on Ceres. Well, I think the reason that they made a big deal about this, quote, pyramid on Ceres, which probably is just a cinder cone, the reason they made a big deal out of it is because the same day they released this image from the Mars rovers of a real pyramid on a hillside on Mars. Now that looks like a pyramid. And my philosophy is, if it looks like something, it probably is that very same thing. Because why would this be a pyramid on Earth and not be a pyramid on Mars? I'm just asking. All I do is ask questions. Why? Yeah, there's no Egyptians on Mars. But again, have you ever really seen a natural rock like this on Earth? I never have. I mean, maybe they exist, and I'm sure if you put that out there, some geologist will find a picture of something. But it doesn't happen very often on Earth, right? Can we at least agree on that? Happens all the time on Mars. Here's another shot of it from the Ancient Aliens episode. It's a pyramid. It's a pyramidal capstone. It's probably about this tall, about 3 feet tall. Here's another object seen in the distance of one rover shot, which bears an exact, very similar resemblance to a Mayan pyramid. Very similar to the pyramid I climbed last year and almost died. Here is an ancient Egyptian bent pyramid and another type of capstone. This capstone is from the Mars Pathfinder landing site. So again, pyramids appear to be pretty common on Mars, but they're all natural if they're on Mars. Just trust me. Here's another comparison of the pyramid on Mars, the recent one, and the pyramids in Egypt. What? Corey Good is speaking now, and I'm losing my audience. Am I that boring? Oh. How about Stonehenge on Mars? Here's a guy that found an image of what he felt looks a lot like Stonehenge. Stonehenge is on a raised mound. It has all these different loose stones. Some of them have fallen over. But when you make a comparison, I think it's not a bad comparison. Stonehenge on Earth and something on Mars. Earth, Mars. This one might be a little bit hard to see because of the coloring, but if you look at this, see this is sort of a squared kind of structure, flat roof, sides that kind of corrugate down, straight vertical side, and then there's a doorway in the middle of it, right? So this is a wall in front of it. It looks like a cottage. It looks like the Shire or something, right? See, this is where the wall used to be, and then this is another object, and yeah, that doorway is exactly tall enough, about 6 or 8 feet, for a human being to pass through. And I think I played with it a little bit more. Yeah, it looks just like this bunker on Earth. This is a bunker at an airfield in England. This is the real Shire, and this is the Shire on Mars. So again, if you look, you can see all kinds of things. This is a friend of mine. This is Neville Thompson. He finds all kinds of cool stuff. Look him up. And wow, what is all this stuff? But, I mean, he finds these objects sticking up out of the ground that NASA says are just rocks that have all these angular shapes to them. This looks like some sort of console, or it looks kind of like that weird little cube thing from the Hellraiser movies. I don't know what it is. All I know is it's got some weird stuff on it, and it has these very angular shapes, which are not common for rocks at all. Here's another guy, which is completely flat, some sort of instrumentation on the front, like a vent plate there. See this square thing? This is a piece of machinery. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and profession. If I saw that, I'd say, okay, that's engineering. Somebody built that. Somebody did not. That is not a natural random rock. Here's one. This is Martine Graney, who is just wonderful, lady from England. Yeah, argue this one, okay? And again, there's the original image. All these guys, I always include the data set. You want to go back, you want to find it, go right ahead, play with it yourself. This is some sort of fossilized kind of statue sticking up out of the ground, and when you enhance it to its best and correct the color, it looks like, I don't know, a statue. It's about 6 feet long. Here's a cylindrical object sticking out of the ground. Looks like maybe a sculpture or a piece of machinery. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? Is the little ship that the Mayan guy is flying on the tombstone cap. I'm going to go through these kind of rapidly and just let them speak for themselves. Okay, I think this one probably looked a lot better on my computer than it does on the screen. But notice this is, again, square, sort of a square rectangular shape. It looks like this is, and these jaws that kind of, there's an opening in there. Look at the little mandibles coming out. I mean, again, that's not alive, but it's some sort of gripping thing. That's again, my mind looks at that and says that's design. Somebody built that for some purpose. Here is a really weird looking thing on a hillside that is layered and got vertical supports on it and different tubes. And I mean, honestly, what it reminds me of is some kind of equipment rack off of an airplane. You know, like this would be an oxygen tank and hose coming out of it. See that layer there, and then that's the bottom. It's all part of a structure that broke apart that has some kind of instrumentation in it. It's not a natural rock formation. I don't know how something evolves like that. Here's the same thing, colorized or color corrected, and here it is, the original, where again NASA keeps the color all the same. And this is one of the ways that they trick you into not seeing what you're seeing or what you think you're seeing or what's really there. They trick you by making all the color the same, so everything blends in together. You're not able to make differentiations as to what the details are. Here's I don't know, something that looks manufactured to me. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now, these guys, Mars: A Civilization Lost, great website, great group. I don't know, skeleton. Don't know what that is. Admiral Akbar on Mars. Admiral Akbar. This one is so freaking weird. I can't figure out what this one is. But here he is in close-up. Now this over here is separate. This is actually, I think this part of it is actually behind it. I think this is sort of a face that kind of wraps around like that, maybe. These teeth are a little bit misleading because there is some artifact in your smile, honey. They're like teeth, right? But that is hollowed out, and that is a spherical ball, and you don't get a ball out of nature. It just does not happen. Yes.
So do you think these are things that may have crash landed there, or do you think their entrance is inside?
Well, a lot of these, like that guy right there, is probably about this tall. So it's the head of a statue or something that's fallen apart. I mean, think of all the different things in our civilization. If that light fixture right there that's shaped kind of like a wedge, if that fell down and broke off and laid there for 1,000 years and somebody found it, they would see this wedge thing and they wouldn't really know what it was, but they would know that, like, that's an air conditioning. See the air conditioner? See this square box? That's a metal box. I mean, I don't know what they are. A lot of them are just pieces of debris of this civilization. Remember, Mars was devastated by catastrophic flooding, and it probably swept all this stuff down, beat the crap out of it, and wrecked it. Now, this thing, I don't know what it is. What's that? Atomic attack is a possibility we can talk about. But again, the comparison between Admiral Akbar and this is, I think, fairly close. So it could be some sort of cultural thing. It could be some god or goddess. It could be a statue. I don't know what it is. All I know is if he's alive, I never want to meet him because he's ugly. I don't know why I called him Admiral Akbar. Here's some other stuff on Mars. Just, again, you find these little squared off kinds of rocks which just can't be rocks. And you find, look at this thing right here. This is, some sort of, I don't know, looks like a ray gun, doesn't it? I mean, laying on its side, like there's a handle, there's where the ammo goes in. I mean, it's something. And again, I could show you literally hundreds of these things. Here's a piece that looks like a piece of a statue that's been carved or something. Foot? I don't know. There's some other stuff here that looks a little bit weird. And this is what NASA does to images. This is the same image, enhanced versus not enhanced. So they flatten all the color out so you don't see that there's this sort of pyramidal shape sticking up out of the ground. Here. This one this one really caught my eye because when I saw it, I said, that's like an equipment rack for an aircraft. If you go inside of an F-15, a fighter jet, any Boeing plane, any Airbus plane, and you open up the equipment bay doors where you can service the avionics, there's these racks. And on these metal racks, they have different types of equipment that are stacked in there, and they have tubes that go to the hydraulics, and there's hydraulic pumps that have connections that are in these racks. And, as you look at this in close-up, again, this is some artifacting here, but, okay, that's like one side of it. That's a square piece there. There's the bottom rack. It's buried. But again, there's some sort of instrument here in this thing. See that tube? There's a tube right there. There's a tube right there. And it compares, I think, really favorably to what equipment racks look like off the shelf. Okay, here's Jericho on a hillside on Mars. Walled city. Arches and everything. Love to go in there and find out what's in. Here's the road where you walk up to enter it. Right up there. From a distance. This, I don't really know what this is, but it's kind of weird. Has, again, some ramp, like some kind of ramp coming down and a cylindrical shape. Here's another pyramid found by James Tracy of Utah. Oh, no, UFAH. Another pyramidal object sticking up out of the ground, some distance from the rover. Here's some ones I just picked up the other day. See the square entrance? It's perfectly square. That's like cut out. Somebody cut that out of there. You can take a picture of it. This is one found by Dave Gannett. There's a dome, like some sort of dome on top of the hill. Just on top of the hill. It's not the shield or anything from the lander. This is our guy named Rami Bar-Elian who finds a lot of cool stuff. Again, just weird geometric shape, partially buried mounds. Now this is interesting to me because I get this right away. This is like an equipment box. Okay, look at the air conditioners there. See, there's 4 metal sides, right? Hanging off the roof there, they're brown ones. Now take that and you stick it on the ground and it erodes. And you can see that, at least I can see, this is a side, that's a side, and I'm going to guess there's a square one there. That's a metal box that's now all eroded down and rusted away that used to contain something, some kind of equipment. And I've got other pictures, which I'm not going to bore you with, which show stuff inside of it. Here's a flying saucer sitting on the ground on Mars. Kind of looks like the Jupiter 2 from Lost in Space. And notice how reflective it is, like it's metal. And then all this stuff here, this is, again, sand dunes that sure look a lot like cables sticking out of the side of the mountain. Here's kind of a square, rectangular box of something. Here's a piece of driftwood on Mars, a railroad tie on Mars, fossilized in the middle of nowhere. There's no life on Mars, though. No, that's a naturally eroded rock. Here's a tree stump sticking up out of the surface of Mars. Close-up of it there. That's Neville Thompson again. Neville does great work. Here's a spoon. Anybody want a wood spoon? There's one on Mars. Go get it. there. It's a spoon. This one he says fake sand. There's a lot of images. This one looks like what they did is it looks like they took sand from some other part of the image and like put it over there to just cover up whatever was in there, which they really didn't want us to see. It's just so smooth and so obviously fakey. Here's kind of a, spaceship buried, exposed on Mars. Tubular craft, kind of like that, Apollo 19 or Apollo 20 video that's out there on YouTube? A piece of pottery on Mars. Obviously ceramic. Skeleton of a dead praying mantis on Mars? I don't know. See the big head? That scary, anybody? Big dark eye sockets. There's the spine. Is that the spine right there? That's the size of man. It's about 6 feet. What's that? It's like a gray. Or there's these other beings called the praying mantis types, which are very scary to anybody who's encountered them. And it looks kind of more like those. Here's some more blocks that have geometry on them that, again, just do not look like natural evolution. Here is a really weird-looking piece of machinery on Mars. It looks kind of like a rock, but then, this thing is hollowed out right there. So that's not big enough to walk into, but it's pretty weird stuff. Okay, how's my time? How much time do I have left? 8 minutes. Okay, I'm going to whip through this. I want to leave you with the really weird stuff of what's going on Mars. My friend Martine Graney, this is not the weird stuff. My friend Martine Graney found this image from the rover, and she was looking at it, and she saw something kind of on its side right here. She saw this pattern in the ground that kind of caught her eye. She wasn't really sure what it was, so she kind of flipped it over. And when she flipped it over, it started looking like a dude. It looked like the Shroud of Turin. At least it did to my eye, right? Does anybody get that from this? So I started playing with that. And again, this is like a symbol. It's like dirt, drawn in the dirt next to some other stuff. And I started looking at this and playing around with it. And you can see that there's sort of a face there. And there's these spikes like a crown or something. And as I messed with it, let me see how my stuff comes out. I got this out of it. I inverted the color. And again, you can kind of see a face. And there's the crownish thing. And there's his shoulders. One shoulder is another shoulder. He's got a robe on or something with a T-shirt underneath. Maybe it's a Chevin T-shirt like Mike Bara is wearing. And as you dig into this and start playing with it in different ways, it gets more and more obvious. And then I got really weirded out because it kind of looks like me a little bit. Looks like he's got a beard. See this? See this one right here? These are 4 different versions of this. But you can see that it's some sort of depiction. And it looks like, it looks kind of like Jesus or somebody, right? With a beard, as we traditionally view him, with a robe on and a shirt underneath. And he's apparently got a little bit of a beard and a face, and he's got this crown on his head, not a crown of thorns, but a crown of light. It looks like he's walking through a doorway, right? Doesn't it? Kind of, because this light area is the doorway. And I thought, oh, wow, we found the tomb of Jesus on Mars. It's probably not what it is, but I think it's something. And again, look, once you accept the fact that there is a 1,500-foot long humanoid-looking face on Mars, which I accepted in 1990, everything's on the table, right? Nothing is off the table, because whatever the truth is, nobody knows how weird it's really going to get. Here's another shot of it. And I don't think we're just seeing things because we're all seeing it. At least most of us are seeing it. Who's not seeing it? I want to berate you. No, I'm just kidding. So I don't know what this is, but it is something interesting and different. Now I'm going to scan through this. This is great. This is there's these guys that think that they're seeing parrots and animals and penguins and dragons and stuff on the surface of Mars, right? And so they have this whole thing built up around it, and they want them to say it's like Nazca, but Nazca is different because everything at Nazca is all together. Everything on Mars is all spread out, but near this one thing that they thought looked like a parrot, there's this really cool city-looking area, which is right here. This is as big as a town. This used to be a lake bed. I'm going to go through this real quick. You can see that there's some weird shapes here, and there's like streets. See, street, 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 parallel, 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 parallel. But what's interesting about this picture is that this is all pitch black. See that? It's all dark, and everything looks very flat. Well, NASA took 3 or 4 pictures of this, and there's a ton of stuff to look at it there. We're not going to have time to go through it all. There's a ton of stuff to look at there. But then the request was made to take another picture of it, which they did in the dark. In other words, there's a little bit of shadow over this area, because this is up higher than this. So when they did that, this is the same area, but it looks pretty different. This area right here on the right, this dark area that's really dark, that's this right here. So I don't know if you can do this in your head and see the 3D, but this other lighter stuff here, this is the floor of a lake or river right through here. These are, in fact, not flat. These are vertical walls sticking straight up, like concrete walls. And see those stripes on them? Yeah. See if I can get a close-up. See these stripes? Okay, if you're going to build a retaining wall, let's say, the way you're going to design it is you're going to build it with beads in it or waves in it, because that makes it structurally stiffer. That is someone's intent of design that we're looking at right there. And again, this whole place, it has all kinds of stuff. It's got this weird looking antenna thing. It's got a complex of different buildings that are there. Here's one of the main buildings. I call it the factory. And there's an entrance here, and there's weird stuff. And again, this looks 10 times better on my computer than it does. Here's the restaurant at the LAX, on Mars. See? There it is. There's the legs. Okay? You think I'm laughing. Here's the Indianapolis 500. These are like reservoirs. Look at this. There's a platform here. See this platform? And there's some sort of machine on top of it, and it looks like it slides underneath there. Like, I think it's a drilling rig. They slide it underneath there, and it's connected by, if I can catch it, see this tube? Right up here to this, I don't know, school bus. But there's a tube here. And then this thing right up there's a closer shot of it. There's a tube connecting down to this platform. This dark thing right there. Now, again, it's blurry. I apologize, but this is the best NASA will give us. They aren't going to give us the good stuff. And then this object right above it is this thing. Whoops. It looks like what? A giant potato bug or something, right? With tubes coming out of it. Here's another parallel tube right next to it. Here's where it connects. Here's where they fill up the tank. What is that? I don't know. It's some sort of mining operation or something. And again, there's more stuff here that's really good, but I want to get to the very last thing. Okay, I told you, I promised you that I would show you proof that NASA is faking some of the images from Mars. Okay? There is a place in Canada, got a Canada thing going here tonight, called Devon Island. Devon Island is pretty much uninhabited. So what they did is they decided to go to Devon Island and test the rover cameras and rover equipment on Devon Island. So NASA has a base there, which is very small, but it's occupied with their different rover testing facilities so they can test their new rover technology. As you notice, it looks desolate. It looks kind of like Mars. And so they take their test rovers and their new test rover cameras, and they take them up to Devon Island, which is fairly harsh conditions, and they run them around and take loads of pictures and see how they come out and calibrate the color and all these different kinds of things. Well, here's a picture of a guy in a spacesuit on Devon Island riding, this is not Mars, but riding, on our, what do you call it, a ATV, four-wheel ATV, and, right next to him, take a look at that. And now, if you just saw that part of it, you'd probably assume it was Mars, especially if NASA told you it was Mars, right? Because it looks like Mars. Here's a picture as an example of what Mars actually looks like. This is a hillside on Mars. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's not. It's actually Ireland. So this is how easy it is to make Ireland look like Mars. So think about this. Keep this in mind. Side by side, Ireland, Mars, Mars, Ireland. Actually, they're both Ireland. One is just colorized the way NASA does it, and one is real. And they put in a little fake rover thing there. So, a couple of years ago, this picture came out. And when it came out, a bunch of people started scouring it like they always do, like this army of people I've just showed you. And the story comes out and hits, and it says, somebody found a rat on Mars. And CNN, Anderson Cooper, they make a big joke out of the rat on Mars. Ha, 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 look at how stupid these people are. It's all pareidoia. You ever heard that term? Which basically means you're just seeing things, okay? Now, there's a great article on my blog, There's no such thing as pareidoia. It's pinned to the top. It does not exist. There is no thing that human beings do that makes you think you're seeing something that you're not seeing. It just simply doesn't exist. The whole cloud thing, you know why you think you see a poodle in a cloud? Because the cloud looks like a poodle. It really does, for a while until it changes shape, right? So they came out with all these stories ridiculing this little guy here, which somebody was saying was a rat on Mars. There's a rat on Mars. There's life on Mars. So CNN, NASA, Dr. Phil Plait, known bloated sack of protoplasm, made a big stink out of this, and they all mocked us in the UFO community about how stupid we are. There's only one problem. Devon Island does have one inhabitant. That inhabitant is called an Arctic lemming. This is an Arctic lemming. He bears a striking resemblance to the rat on Mars. In fact, screw it, that is an Arctic lemming. There's no way around it. So this picture, bluntly, was not taken on Mars. It was taken on Devon Island, and NASA put it out there, calling it a picture of Mars, to do one thing, which is to create this whole controversy so they can knock us down, they can shoot us down. Not to make an analogy back to the political stuff at the beginning, but it's the same kind of thing that's going on with the news media right now. And right now the victim is Trump, but Trump is not important. What's important is that it could be any of us. It could be us they pick on next. And look at how they gang up on him about that stupid stuff, the same way they did to us. And the bottom line is, we caught him. That guy is that guy. Bottom line. Now, I'm going to finish you with the really, really weird stuff. This guy named, God, why can I never, not Malcolm Scott, he was a linebacker for the Seahawks and the Raiders. Super Bowl 48 MVP. But Malcolm, I forget Malcolm's last name, slipped me this thing under my door one time, this picture. And I took it and I made this meme. So what is that? What the F is that? Well, as you look at this picture, now I've gone back, he's since found the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter image. I've gone back, I've looked. My normal standard is, if there isn't a bunch of other artificial stuff around it, it's probably just a trick of light and shadow, I hate to say that, or it's some really weird looking rock. Well, the problem is that I didn't find anything else around it, but as I looked at the actual image of this thing, what I saw more and more in greater depth is this. And what that sucker is that is a cat playing air guitar on Mars. He's even got a foot pedal. Now his guitar has been lost. But, you know, look, the guitar is delicate. You know how the peepees on all the statues, the Greek statues have all fallen off? They're all broken? Same thing, his guitar's probably broken. But I make a joke of this, but this thing is really there. And it's 65 feet tall. And you can look at this, there's an alcove. It's like there's an alcove cut into the side of this. And if you go back one, there's actually a path where you could walk. It's cut into the side of this mountain. And it's some sort of human-cat hybrid with a cat's head. And it's on Mars. Now, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it represents, except that Mars is a really, really weird place. And it is not at all what they're telling us. And I guess that's the theme of the whole thing today, is that things are not as we are being told. And we all knew that, but it stretches out way beyond just what's on Mars, what's on the moon, and are there aliens coming. It stretches into politics now, and I think all of it seems to be coming to some sort of energetic head over the next few years. So I'm going to leave you with The Cat on Mars. My workshop is tonight. It's the Secret Space Program. It's not as funny as this one, but hopefully you come try and see it. Thank you.